Hello, I'm Adam and welcome to this Tetris Publishing video on querying SQL Server. In this session we'll be looking at filtering data using the where clause. Let's begin by looking at the subjects that we're going to cover during this video. To begin with, a little reminder. I want to show you once again how joins actually filter data. Then I want to look at where clauses, the really important function when filtering. We're going to see how where clauses can filter one element, many elements, how you can use them to exclude an element if you want to, and how to filter numbers by threshold values. Then we'll see how to filter ranges of numbers, and finally we'll look at filtering on yes or no criteria in SQL Server. The first thing that I want to explain is more a reminder of something that you will have seen if you watched a previous video. That is that using inner joins in queries will filter the data that is output by a query. So before even looking at the core keyword that you use when filtering SQL Server, the where keyword, let's remind ourselves of the way that joins can work to filter data. So here we are in SSMS, a query window open and connected to the Prestige Cars database. I'm going to paste in a query that joins three tables and then I'm going to run it. This query joins the stock, model and make tables. Let's take a good look at the results. Now you may remember from looking at the make data in a previous video that there are some make tables for which there are no models. As this query uses the model ID field to link the make and model tables, this means that no makes for which there are no models can be displayed. Equally, the stock table, as it joins on the model ID field to the model table, can only show stock where a model exists in stock, so no models for which there is no car in stock can be displayed. Essentially, this means that a couple of makes and several models that appear in the make and model tables do not appear in the query output. There are no Cadillacs, for instance. In other words, the query has filtered the data. To give you an idea of what's happened, look at this schematic representation of how the query works. This Venn diagram shows you that if you join tables A and B, you get the data outlined in 1. If you join tables B and C, you get the data outlined in 2. If you join tables A and C, you get the data outlined in 3. However, if you join tables A, B and C, you get the data outlined in 4. This aspect of database querying is so important that it needs to be repeated. So here's another way of looking at the filter effect of joins in queries. When you join tables, only the data that can be linked across all the tables will appear in the result. If we take this principle and show it as a set of tables, you can see what really happens. Time to move on to something really new. Firstly, I'm going to close this query window without saving it and then create a new one. And I'm going to make sure that it's connected to the Prestige Cars database. I'm now going to paste in a simple query that will list all the red cars in the stock table. As I also want to see the model name which is stored in the model table, I'll need to join these two tables. This is what the query looks like. Now let's run the query. I'll press F5 to do it this time, and let's see what happens. Well, it looks like the query's worked. Only red cars are in the output. This query introduces what is probably the most important SQL keyword, the where keyword. This keyword is used to filter the data in any and all of the tables in a SQL query. Once you've got a query that has a valid select and from clauses, you add the where clause to the query. Then you enter the name of a field from one of the tables in the from clause, a space, an equal sign, and an element to filter on that is contained in the field that you've specified. If the field contains text, as is the case here, then the element to filter, the colour red in this example, must be contained in single quotes. What I want to do now is to extend the where clause so that it filters on several colours. Now to do this I don't need to rewrite the whole query, just modify the where clause a little. So look at what I'm doing. instead of specifying a single colour and using the equal sign, I've kept the same field name, the colour field from the stock table, but I've used the in keyword and a list of colours inside parentheses. As the colours are text elements and not numbers, each of them has to be in single quotes. I'll now run the query. And now let's take a closer look at the results. As you can see, the colours returned by the query correspond to those specified in the in part of the where clause. So SQL can filter on a set of elements really easily. To continue with this short series of examples on how to filter data, I want to show you how a where clause can be used to exclude data. For this, I'm going to close the query window without saving it and create a new one. And I'm going to make sure that this window is connected to the Prestige Cars database. Now I'm going to paste a very slightly more complex query into the query window. Let's take a look at the code. This SQL extends the code that you saw previously to include the sales details table in the set of source tables. This means that I will be using the filter effect of the added table to show only cars that have been sold, not just those in stock. However, the really important new thing about this piece of code is the use of the lesser than and greater than symbols instead of an equal sign when filtering data on a field. This tells SQL to exclude all the elements that follow these symbols. So, as the field name in the where clause is the make name field from the make table, what the where clause is saying is the results must show all makes except Ferrari. Finally, I then added an order by clause so the makes will appear in alphabetical order. This also reminds you that the order by clause always comes after the where clause in a SQL statement. Let's run the code and see what the results look like. You can see that there are no Ferraris in this list, so the SQL has given us exactly the results that we asked for. It's time now to switch from filtering on text-based elements and start using numbers. For starters, let's look at how to show all the numbers above a certain figure. This time I'll keep the query window and simply select and delete the current query. Then I'm going to paste in the new query. Remember that this will keep the old results until I actually run the new query. So let's run this query. This query uses the stock and model tables and applies a where clause to say where the cost is greater than 50,000. It does this by adding the field that you want to filter on after the where keyword, and of course a space, and then entering the greater than symbol. Finally, you add the figure that you want to use as the threshold to filter on, that is 50,000. Taken together, these elements allow you to return all the figures over 50,000 in the database. This query can switch the other way and show only vehicles costing less than 50,000 very easily. If you want it to, all you have to do is to replace the greater than symbol with a lesser than symbol and rerun the query. Let's do this. As you can see, the results are totally different this time, as all the costs are less than 50,000. Here we are in a new query window connected to the Prestige Cars database and ready for use. I'm now pasting in a query that will show a list of makes of car where the cost of parts is between £1,000 and £2,000. This means using the make, model and stock tables and then adding a specific where clause. Let's look at the where clause in this piece of SQL. Here I'm using the parts cost field from the stock table as the field to filter on. However, instead of following the field name with a single comparison operator and value, I'm using two comparison operators and values. This allows me to specify a range of values. More specifically, the where clause uses something new, the between operator, followed by the lower value in the range that you want to compare, and then the and keyword, followed by the upper limit of the range you want to compare the column contents with. Taken together, these tell SQL Server to return only records where the parts cost is between these two values. As a final touch, the select clause adds the distinct keyword to ensure that each make is only returned once, and the results are in alphabetical order thanks to the order by clause. So, time to run the query and see what happens. This is the list of makes of car where the cost of parts is between £1,000 and £2,000. The query did exactly what we asked it to. As a final example, I'm going to select the current query, replace it with another query and run it straight away. This query shows yet another way that the where clause can be used to filter data. On this occasion, the query is filtering on a yes/no condition, true or false if you prefer. This kind of condition is known as a Boolean filter, and it can have only one of two outcomes. In this case, the query is looking at whether the vehicle sold a right-hand drive or not. This information is contained in the isRHD column of the stock table. However, as we also want to display the make name, we first have to join a total of 4 tables: make, model, stock and sales details. Now let's look closely at the where clause. This simply applies the field name to test on, that is the isRHD field, adds an equals operator, and then, if we're wanting true values, adds a 1. If you want to display false values, you enter a 0 instead. So here's how you can filter on true or false in SQL Server. Let's resume the fundamental things that you saw during this video. Firstly, you saw, once again, that using joins will in fact filter data in a query. Then you saw that you can filter on one or more elements, text or numbers, to return exact matches for data. Then we moved on to looking at filtering on numbers and ranges. As this is such an important subject, there are inevitably a few tricks you need to be aware of. Firstly, where clauses can exclude as well as include data. Secondly, the where clause applies on top of any filtering that's been brought in by an inner join. All text has to be in single quotes, and numbers must not have any quotes or formatting. Thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this short session and that it will encourage you to continue learning all about querying SQL Server. And remember, if you need a full and progressive introduction to querying SQL Server, you can always take a look at our books on this subject. These 2 volumes can help transform you from a SQL novice to an analytics maestro. To find them, just go to Amazon.com and search for Query Answers with SQL Server. Alternatively, visit your local bookstore. If you want to download the sample data that you saw in this video, as well as the SQL queries that we used, then navigate to www.tetrispublishing.com/SQL Server. Here you can find the sample data for download and practice querying it using SQL Server.